In the harsh mountains of Afghanistan, where bullets fly faster than prayers and survival depends on split-second decisions, there's an unwritten rule among elite military units. Respect is earned through fire, not paperwork. When 23-year-old Sarah Chen stepped off the transport helicopter at Forward Operating Base Viper, the Navy SEALs didn't see a decorated combat medic with 3 years of intensive training. They saw a small Asian woman with a medical bag. And in their world, that meant one thing. She was just there to patch up wounds, not fight wars. What they didn't know was that Sarah had grown up in the roughest neighborhood of Detroit, where her immigrant parents ran a small clinic and taught her that healing and protecting were two sides of the same coin. They didn't know about her unconventional training methods, her photographic memory for battlefield medicine, or the fact that she could field strip a rifle blindfolded faster than most of their own operators. But most importantly, they had no idea that within 72 hours, this just a medic would make a weapon choice so brilliant, so devastatingly effective, that it would not only save their lives, but revolutionize how special forces think about combat medicine forever. This is the true story of how Sarah Chen turned mockery into respect, skepticism into admiration, and proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon on any battlefield isn't what you expect, it's who's carrying it. The rotor blades of the Black Hawk helicopter kicked up a tornado of dust and debris as it touched down on the makeshift landing pad at Forward Operating Base Viper. Through the swirling cloud of Afghan dirt, Sarah Chen grabbed her medical pack and rifle case, her boots hitting the ground with determination that belied her nervous stomach. At 5'4" inches tall and weighing barely 130 pounds, she looked more like a college student than a combat medic about to join one of the most elite Navy SEAL teams in Afghanistan. The base was exactly what she had expected, and nothing like she had imagined all at once. Concrete barriers topped with razor wire formed protective walls around a collection of prefabricated buildings and tents. The air smelled of diesel fuel, dust, and something else she couldn't quite identify but would later learn was the perpetual scent of tension that hung over every forward operating base in hostile territory. Mountains rose like ancient guardians in every direction, their peaks touching a sky that seemed impossibly blue despite the chaos that lurked in the valleys below. As Sarah walked across the compound, her medical bag slung over one shoulder and her weapon case in her opposite hand, she could feel eyes following her every step. Groups of soldiers stopped their conversations to watch her pass. She caught fragments of whispered comments that made her jaw clench involuntarily. "That's the new medic? She looks like she should be working in a hospital, not out here. Hope she can handle the real stuff when it hits the fan. Pretty little thing like that, wonder how long before she breaks down crying." Sarah had heard it all before during her training, during her previous deployments, and she would hear it again. Being a female medic in special operations was like being a unicorn, rare, often doubted, and constantly having to prove that she belonged in a world dominated by men who had been taught that bigger and stronger always meant better. But Sarah Chen had grown up in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood, where her parents had run a small medical clinic that served everyone from auto workers to gang members who needed stitches but couldn't risk going to a hospital. She had learned early that healing wasn't just about bandages and medicine, it was about earning trust, staying calm under pressure, and sometimes making impossible decisions with incomplete information. Her father, a surgeon who had fled Vietnam with nothing but his medical knowledge, and her mother, a nurse who could start an IV line in a moving car during a thunderstorm, had taught her that medicine was both an art and a battlefield skill. The SEAL team's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, was waiting for her outside the main operations building. At 35, Morrison was exactly what Central Casting would order if they needed someone to play a Navy SEAL commander. 6'2" of pure military precision, with steel gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of whatever they focused on, and a handshake that could crack walnuts. His uniform was crisp despite the desert environment, and his bearing suggested a man who had never met a problem he couldn't solve through careful planning and overwhelming force. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said, though Sarah noticed he didn't use her military rank of hospital corpsman first class. It was a small slight, but one that established the hierarchy immediately. In his world, she was medical personnel first, military second. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," Sarah replied, matching his formal tone while meeting his gaze directly. Her father had taught her that respect was earned through competence, but confidence had to be demonstrated from the first moment. Morrison gestured for her to follow him into the operations building, where maps covered every available wall surface. Red pins marked known enemy positions, blue pins indicated friendly forces, and a web of colored string connected various locations like a three-dimensional chess game played by people whose mistakes cost lives. "Let me be straight with you, Doc," Morrison began, using the universal military nickname for medical personnel. "My team has been operating without a dedicated medic for 2 months. We've been making do with combat lifesaver training. But Command decided we needed someone with advanced medical training for our next operation." He paused, studying her face for any sign of nervousness or uncertainty. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside she was cataloging every detail of the maps around them, automatically calculating distances, elevation changes, and potential casualty evacuation routes. "The men are skeptical," Morrison continued, "not because you're a woman necessarily, but because they're used to operating as a tight unit. Adding someone new, especially someone who hasn't been through SEAL training, changes the dynamic." Sarah nodded slowly. She had expected this conversation, though she appreciated Morrison's directness. Many commanders would have pretended everything was fine while allowing their teams to express their doubts through subtle sabotage and exclusion. "With respect, sir, I've been attached to special operations units before. I understand that trust is earned, not assigned. I'm here to do my job, keep your people alive and fighting fit, and prove that I belong on your team through performance, not politics." Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his professional facade. "Fair enough. Let me introduce you to the team." The SEAL team was gathered in what they called the team room, a combination meeting area, equipment storage, and informal social space. 8 men, all between 25 and 35, all looking like they had been assembled from the same genetic template of lean muscle, intense focus, and casual confidence that came from knowing they were among the best at what they did. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Rodriguez, the team's point man, was cleaning his rifle with the kind of methodical attention that suggested meditation more than maintenance. Staff Sergeant Tommy Blake, the demolitions expert, was reviewing blueprints while absently juggling 3 small explosive charges in his offhand. The team sniper, Petty Officer Second Class David Kim, was adjusting the scope on his rifle with the precision of a watchmaker. As Morrison made introductions, Sarah could read the skepticism in their body language like a medical textbook. Arms crossed, minimal eye contact, responses that were polite but not welcoming. These were men who had learned to depend on each other completely, and she was an unknown variable in an equation where unknown variables got people killed. "Doc Chen will be joining us for Operation Serpent Strike," Morrison announced. "She'll be our primary medical officer and will accompany us on all missions until further notice." Petty Officer Rodriguez looked up from his rifle. "No offense, Doc, but have you ever been in actual combat? Not just treating casualties after the fact, but in the middle of a firefight where you need to shoot back while you're trying to save someone's life." It was a fair question, and Sarah had been expecting it. "I've been deployed twice to Iraq and once to Afghanistan in support roles with Rangers and Special Forces. I've treated gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, and blast trauma under direct fire. I've also had to return fire while treating casualties on multiple occasions." Sergeant Blake looked up from his blueprints. "What's your preferred weapons setup?" This was where things always got interesting. Sarah's weapon choices were unconventional, based on her unique perspective as someone who needed to fight and heal simultaneously. Primary weapon is a modified M4 carbine with a shorter barrel for close quarters work and an ACOG scope for precision shots. I carry a Sig Sauer P320 as sidearm, but I also carry something most medics don't use. She opened her weapon case and withdrew what looked like a standard M4, but the team's trained eyes immediately noticed the modifications. The barrel was shorter than standard, the stock was adjustable, and there were attachment points for accessories that weren't typical military issue. "But this is my real difference maker," Sarah said, withdrawing a second smaller case. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a weapon that made several of the SEALs exchange glances. It was a highly modified crossbow, compact enough to be carried alongside her medical equipment, but sophisticated enough to be lethal at significant range. The bow was fitted with a scope, a quick-loading mechanism, and a quiver designed to hold specially designed bolts. "A crossbow?" Blake asked, and Sarah could hear the skepticism in his voice. "Silent, deadly accurate up to 100 meters, and the bolts are designed to deliver more than just kinetic damage, Sarah explained. Some are standard broadheads for eliminating sentries. Others carry specialized payloads. She opened a small container filled with what looked like ordinary crossbow bolts, but each was marked with different colored tape. Red tape is standard lethal. Blue tape carries a fast-acting sedative compound that can incapacitate without killing, useful for capturing high-value targets. Green tape carries a compound that simulates death for several hours, perfect for extracting someone who needs to disappear without actually dying. Yellow tape is my personal favorite.
Which is? Morrison asked, his skepticism giving way to professional curiosity.
Localized anesthetic, perfect for treating casualties who need surgery under fire. Hit them with a yellow bolt in the right spot, and you can operate without them going into shock from pain, but they stay conscious and can still fight if necessary.
The room fell silent as the implications of her weapon system became clear.
She wasn't just a medic who could fight. She was a medic who had redesigned the concept of battlefield medicine around her own unique combat philosophy. Petty Officer Kim, the sniper, leaned forward with genuine interest. How accurate is it? At 50 meters, I can consistently hit a target the size of a quarter. At 100 meters, I can hit a target the size of a silver dollar. Beyond that, I switched to conventional weapons. Rodriguez set down his rifle and looked at Sarah with new interest. Doc, that's actually pretty impressive. But how do we know you can handle yourself when things get real? Before Sarah could answer, the base's alarm system began blaring. The distinctive wail of incoming mortars sent everyone in the room into immediate action, grabbing weapons and heading for defensive positions. As they ran toward the defensive perimeter, Sarah noticed that despite their skepticism, the team automatically positioned themselves to protect her. It was an instinctive response born from years of training. Protect the medic because the medic keeps everyone else alive. The mortar attack was brief but intense. 3 rounds landed within the base perimeter, causing minor structural damage but no casualties. As the all-clear signal sounded, Sarah found herself crouched behind a concrete barrier next to Sergeant Blake, both of them scanning the surrounding mountains for signs of enemy movement. Not bad reflexes, Doc, Blake admitted. You didn't freeze up or need someone to tell you what to do. I've been doing this for a while, Sarah replied, her eyes still focused on potential threat vectors. Just because I carry medical equipment doesn't mean I don't understand tactical situations. As they walked back toward the operations building, Morrison fell into step beside her. The team leaves for Operation Serpent Strike in 18 hours. We'll be infiltrating a suspected Taliban weapons cache in the mountains about 40 kilometers from here. Intelligence suggests it's heavily defended, and we expect significant resistance. Sarah nodded, already running through her mental checklist of medical supplies and equipment needed for an extended operation in hostile territory. One more thing, Doc, Morrison added. Out there, you're not just the medic. You're part of the team. That means everyone depends on everyone else. If you can't handle that responsibility, speak up now. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Morrison directly. Sir, with respect, I didn't volunteer for Special Operations medical training because I wanted an easy assignment. I'm here because I believe I can make your team more effective, not just at staying alive, but at completing the mission successfully. Give me a chance to prove it. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 18 hours, Doc. Use them wisely. As Sarah walked toward her assigned quarters, she could feel the weight of expectations settling around her like body armor. Tomorrow, she would find out if her unconventional approach to combat medicine would make the difference between mission success and mission failure. Tonight, she would prepare her equipment, review the mission parameters, and try to get some sleep before what could very well be the most important test of her military career. The mountains around Forward Operating Base Viper held their secrets close. But tomorrow, Sarah Chen would venture into those mountains with 8 Navy SEALs who still saw her as an untested newcomer. By the time they returned, if they returned, she would either have earned their respect through blood and competence, or she would have proven their skepticism justified. Either way, Operation Serpent Strike would define not just her future with this team, but her entire approach to battlefield medicine in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The pre-dawn darkness of the Afghan mountains felt like a living thing as Sarah Chen made her final equipment checks in the armory of Forward Operating Base Viper.
Her modified medical pack contained enough supplies to treat multiple casualties for an extended period, while her unique crossbow system was secured in a custom harness that allowed for quick deployment without interfering with her primary weapon or medical duties. Around her, the 8 members of SEAL Team 7 moved through their own preparations with the quiet efficiency that marked elite special operations forces. Each man checked and rechecked his equipment, weapons, and ammunition with methodical precision. The casual banter from the previous day had been replaced by focused professionalism, but Sarah could still sense the underlying tension about her inclusion in the mission. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached her position near the weapons rack. "Final briefing in 5 minutes, Doc. After that, we move out." Sarah nodded, securing the last of her specialized crossbow bolts in their designated pouches. Each bolt type was organized for maximum accessibility under stress, with lethal rounds positioned for immediate use and her specialized medical bolts arranged according to likely battlefield scenarios she might encounter. The briefing room was dimly lit by the glow of tactical displays and satellite imagery. Morrison stood before a large screen showing aerial photographs of their target area, a remote mountain compound suspected of housing a significant Taliban weapons cache. Intelligence indicates the facility contains not just small arms and explosives, but potentially shoulder-fired missiles that could threaten coalition aircraft. Morrison began. "Our mission is threefold. Gather intelligence on the weapons cache, eliminate high-value targets if present, and destroy the facility to prevent future use." He clicked through several photographs showing the compound from different angles. The facility was built into the mountainside, with natural rock formations providing excellent defensive positions. Multiple building structures were connected by covered walkways, and guard positions were strategically placed to provide overlapping fields of fire. Expected enemy strength is 15 to 20 fighters, possibly more. Will be inserted by helicopter at Landing Zone Alpha, approximately 3 kilometers from the target. The approach involves crossing 2 ridgelines and a valley that provides minimal cover. Staff Sergeant Blake leaned forward to study the topographical maps. "What about extraction, sir?" "Primary extraction is at Landing Zone Bravo, 1 kilometer south of the target. If that's compromised, secondary extraction is at Landing Zone Charlie, but that requires a 15-kilometer movement through hostile territory." Morrison's gaze settled on Sarah. "Doc, this is where your role becomes critical. The terrain is rough, the enemy is well-armed and familiar with the area, and we may be operating for up to 18 hours without immediate support. So, if someone goes down, you're our only medical resource until we can reach extraction." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Understood, sir. I'm prepared for extended operations and multiple casualty scenarios." Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's point man, spoke up. "What's the rules of engagement? Standard ROE applies, but remember that this facility may contain valuable intelligence. If possible, we want to capture rather than eliminate key personnel. This is where Doc's specialized equipment might prove useful." Several team members glanced at Sarah with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Her crossbow system was unconventional enough that most of them were still uncertain about its practical applications in a real combat situation. Morrison continued the briefing for another 20 minutes, covering contingency plans, communication protocols, and extraction procedures. When he finished, the room fell silent except for the low hum of electronic equipment and the distant sound of helicopters conducting pre-flight checks. "Any questions?" Morrison asked. Petty Officer Kim, the team sniper, raised his hand. "Sir, what's Doc's position in our movement formation?" It was a crucial question that highlighted the fundamental challenge of integrating a new team member into an established unit. In special operations, every person's position during movement was carefully choreographed to maximize effectiveness while minimizing vulnerability. "Doc will operate as our floating support," Morrison decided. "Primary position is center of formation where she can respond to casualties quickly, but she has the flexibility to move forward or back based on tactical requirements." Sarah appreciated Morrison's solution. It acknowledged her dual role as combatant and medic while giving her the freedom to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. 20 minutes later, the team was aboard a modified Black Hawk helicopter, flying through mountain valleys at dangerously low altitude to avoid enemy radar. Sarah sat between Rodriguez and Blake,
feeling the familiar combination of nervousness and anticipation that preceded every combat mission. Through her night vision goggles, the Afghan landscape looked like an alien world painted in shades of green and black. Mountains rose like ancient monuments, their peaks disappearing into a star-filled sky that seemed impossibly distant from the violence that waited in the valleys below. Blake leaned over to speak directly into her ear over the helicopter's noise. "First time working with SEALs, Doc?" "First time with this team," Sarah replied. "But I've worked with special operations before. Different units, similar challenges." Blake nodded, then asked the question she had been expecting. "What made you choose that crossbow setup? Seems like it would be easier to carry more ammunition for conventional weapons." Sarah had answered this question dozens of times during training, but she could see that Blake was genuinely curious rather than challenging her choices. "Battlefield medicine isn't just about treating wounds after they happen," she explained. "Sometimes the best medical intervention is preventing the wound in the first place, or controlling how the wound occurs. My crossbow system gives me options that conventional weapons don't provide." Before Blake could respond, the helicopter's crew chief signaled that they were approaching the landing zone. The aircraft began its descent into a small clearing surrounded by rocky outcroppings that would provide concealment from enemy observation. The insertion went smoothly, with all 9 team members exiting the helicopter and establishing a defensive perimeter within 30 seconds. The Black Hawk disappeared into the darkness, leaving them alone in hostile territory, with nothing but their training, equipment, and mutual dependence to ensure their survival. Morrison signaled for the team to begin movement toward their objective. Rodriguez took point, navigating through the rocky terrain with the confidence of someone who had spent years moving silently through dangerous places. Sarah found herself positioned between the team's communications specialist and demolitions expert, close enough to provide immediate medical support, but far enough from the team leader to avoid interfering with his tactical decision-making. The first 2 hours of movement passed without incident. The team moved through the mountains like ghosts, each step carefully planned to minimize noise and avoid detection. Sarah was impressed by their tactical discipline and the way they automatically adjusted their formation to account for changing terrain and potential threat vectors. As they crested the second ridgeline before their target area, Rodriguez suddenly raised his closed fist, the universal signal for immediate halt. The entire team froze in place, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Through her night vision scope, Sarah could see what had caused Rodriguez to stop. Below them, in a small valley between their position and the target compound, a group of armed men was moving along what appeared to be a well-used trail. Morrison moved forward to Rodriguez's position, studying the enemy patrol through his own optics. After several minutes of observation, he signaled for the team to take cover in a cluster of large rocks while they waited for the patrol to pass. The enemy patrol consisted of 6 men armed with AK-47 assault rifles and what appeared to be at least one rocket-propelled grenade launcher. They were moving casually, suggesting they felt secure in their own territory, and weren't expecting to encounter coalition forces. As the patrol passed beneath their position, Sarah found herself studying their movement patterns and equipment with a medic's analytical eye. She noticed that one of the men was limping slightly, probably from an old injury that hadn't healed properly. Another appeared to be carrying significantly more equipment than the others, suggesting he might be their leader or communication specialist. Once the patrol had disappeared into the darkness, Morrison signaled for the team to continue their approach to the target. The remaining movement to the compound took another hour, with the team moving even more carefully now that they knew enemy forces were actively patrolling the area. The weapons cache compound was larger than the satellite photographs had suggested. Built into a natural depression in the mountainside, it consisted of 4 main buildings connected by covered walkways, with several smaller outbuildings that probably served as storage or guard quarters. From their observation position on a ridge overlooking the compound, Sarah could see at least 8 guards stationed at various defensive positions. The guards appeared alert and well-armed, with heavy machine guns positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire across all approach routes. Morrison spent 20 minutes studying the compound through high-powered optics, identifying guard positions, weapon emplacements, and potential entry points. Finally, he gathered the team leaders for a quick briefing on the assault plan. "We'll approach from the north side, where the terrain provides the best concealment," Morrison whispered. "Kim will take an overwatch position here on the ridge to provide sniper support. Rodriguez and Blake will assault the main building while Thompson and Martinez secure the perimeter." Doc, you'll remain with me and Davis near the center of the compound where you can respond to casualties and provide fire support as needed. It was a sound plan that played to each team member's strengths while maintaining the flexibility needed for a complex operation against an unknown number of defenders. As the team began their final approach to the compound, Sarah felt the familiar heightening of senses that preceded combat. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow could conceal an enemy, and every decision could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The assault began at exactly 0347 hours when Kim's suppressed sniper rifle eliminated 2 guards simultaneously. The remaining guards immediately went to high alert, but they were looking in the wrong direction, as Rodriguez and Blake emerged from concealed positions and began their assault on the main building. Sarah found herself positioned behind a low stone wall with Morrison and Davis, watching the assault unfold through her night vision scope. The crossbow was in her hands, loaded with a lethal bolt, while her modified M4 remained slung across her back for immediate access. The initial assault went according to plan, with the team quickly overwhelming the outer defensive positions and moving toward the main buildings. But as they approached the central structure, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving on the roof of the main building, carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. The figure was positioning himself to attack Rodriguez and Blake from above, and neither of them had seen the threat. SASSA, Sarah made a split-second decision that would define her relationship with the team forever. Instead of calling out a warning that would alert every enemy in the compound to their presence, she raised her crossbow and fired a single silent shot at the figure on the roof. The crossbow bolt struck the enemy fighter center mass, and he collapsed without firing his weapon. But Sarah's shot had been observed by Morrison, who turned to stare at her with an expression of surprise and professional admiration. "Outstanding shot, Doc," Morrison whispered. "You just saved Rodriguez and Blake's lives." The firefight continued for another 10 minutes as the team systematically cleared each building in the compound. When the shooting finally stopped, they had eliminated 12 enemy fighters and captured a significant cache of weapons and intelligence materials. But for Sarah Chen, the most important moment had already passed. In the span of a single crossbow shot, she had transformed from an untested newcomer into a valued member of SEAL Team 7. The weapon choice that had seemed unconventional to the team was now proven as devastatingly effective in the right hands and the right situation. As they prepared to destroy the weapon's cache and move toward their extraction point, Sarah could see a fundamental change in how the team members looked at her. She was no longer just the medic they had to protect and accommodate. She was a teammate who had proven herself under fire and saved lives through skill and decisive action. The real test, however, was yet to come. As they moved toward their extraction point, carrying captured intelligence and weapon samples, Sarah would discover that her crossbow system had capabilities that even she hadn't fully appreciated, and that her role in the team's success was far from over. The extraction from the weapons cache compound had gone smoothly, but as SEAL Team 7 moved through the rocky terrain toward Landing Zone Bravo, Sarah Chen could sense something was wrong. The mountains were too quiet, the kind of unnatural silence that preceded violence in hostile territory. Rodriguez, still on point, had been signaling increasingly frequent stops as they navigated through a narrow valley that provided the most direct route to their extraction point. His body language suggested growing concern about their tactical situation, and Sarah noticed that Morrison was spending more time studying the ridgelines above them through his night vision optics. The team had been moving for 3 hours since leaving the destroyed weapons cache, carrying captured intelligence materials and weapon samples that would provide valuable information about Taliban supply networks. The mission had been a complete success, but success in special operations meant nothing if you couldn't get home to report it. As they approached a particularly narrow section of the valley, where the walls rose steeply on both sides, Rodriguez suddenly dropped to one knee and raised his fist in the emergency halt signal. This time, his posture indicated immediate danger rather than routine caution. Sarah found herself pressed against a large boulder alongside Blake and Davis, watching as Morrison moved forward to assess whatever threat Rodriguez had identified. Through her night vision scope, she could see Morrison and Rodriguez engaged in silent communication using hand signals that indicated multiple enemy contacts in elevated positions. The ambush, when it came, was perfectly executed from the enemy's perspective. Automatic weapons fire erupted simultaneously from positions on both sides of the valley, creating a deadly crossfire that trapped the SEAL team in the open with minimal cover. Sarah's medical training automatically cataloged the tactical situation even as she returned fire with her M4 carbine. The enemy had chosen their ambush point well, using the natural terrain to maximize their advantage, while minimizing the team's ability to maneuver or find adequate cover. Within the first 30 seconds of the firefight, Sarah heard the distinctive sound that every combat medic dreaded most, the sharp cry of "corpseman," followed by urgent calls for medical attention. Blake had taken a round through his left shoulder and was bleeding heavily, despite his attempts to apply pressure to the wound. Davis had been hit in the leg and was unable to move effectively. Most critically, Rodriguez was down near the front of their formation, apparently unconscious and exposed to continued enemy fire. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of the firefight with the calm authority that marked experienced combat leaders. "Doc, get to Rodriguez first. Kim, suppress that machine gun position on the East Ridge. Everyone else covering fire while Doc works." Moving under fire to treat casualties was something Sarah had trained for extensively, but the reality of crawling across open ground while bullets snapped overhead was far more intense than any training scenario. She reached Rodriguez's position to find him unconscious from what appeared to be a severe concussion caused by a bullet that had grazed his helmet. Rodriguez was breathing but unresponsive, and his position near a cluster of rocks provided minimal protection from the enemy fire that continued to rake their area. Sarah needed to treat his head injury and move him to better cover, but conventional medical evacuation procedures were impossible under the current tactical conditions. This was where her unconventional crossbow system would prove its value in ways she had never anticipated during training. Sarah loaded one of her specialized yellow-tipped bolts into the crossbow, the ones containing localized anesthetic compound. Instead of using it on an enemy target, she used it on Rodriguez himself, placing the bolt carefully in his shoulder muscle, where the anesthetic would be absorbed quickly but wouldn't interfere with his vital functions. The anesthetic bolt allowed her to move Rodriguez without causing additional trauma from pain response, and within minutes she had dragged him to better cover behind a large rock formation. More importantly, the anesthetic kept him from going into shock while she addressed his head injury, while Kim's sniper rifle systematically eliminated enemy positions on the ridgelines. Sarah moved between Blake and Davis, using conventional medical supplies to treat their wounds while maintaining her own suppressive fire against enemy positions. Blake's shoulder wound was serious but not life-threatening if properly treated. Sarah used her specialized medical kit to stop the bleeding and stabilize the injury, but she could see that he was experiencing significant pain that would interfere with his ability to fight effectively. "Blake, I'm going to try something unconventional," Sarah said, loading another yellow-tipped anesthetic bolt into her crossbow. "This is going to hurt for about 2 seconds, then you'll have complete pain relief in that shoulder for several hours." Blake's eyes widened as he realized what she intended to do. "Doc, are you seriously going to shoot me with a crossbow in the middle of a firefight?" "Trust me," Sarah replied, and fired the anesthetic bolt into the muscle near Blake's shoulder wound. Blake jerked from the initial impact, then his eyes widened in amazement as the pain from his gunshot wound disappeared completely. "Holy shit, Doc, that actually worked," Blake said, testing his range of motion. "I can move the arm without any pain at all." Davis's leg wound was more complex, involving what appeared to be a fractured femur in addition to soft tissue damage. Moving him would be extremely difficult and painful under normal circumstances, but Sarah's anesthetic bolts provided a solution that conventional combat medicine couldn't match. After administering the localized anesthetic, Sarah was able to properly splint Davis's leg and prepare him for movement without causing additional trauma or shock from pain. Davis remained conscious and alert, able to contribute fire support while Sarah completed her treatment. But the most dramatic demonstration of her crossbow system's capabilities was yet to come. As the firefight continued, Morrison identified a critical tactical problem. The enemy machine gun position on the eastern ridge was positioned behind excellent cover and was preventing the team from advancing toward better defensive positions. Kim's sniper rifle could suppress the position but couldn't eliminate it completely, and a direct assault would be costly and time-consuming. "Doc," Morrison called out during a brief lull in the firing, "can those specialized bolts of yours do anything about that machine gun nest?" Sarah studied the enemy position through her scope,
calculating range and wind conditions. The machine gun nest was approximately 70 meters away, well within her crossbow's effective range, and she could see two figures manning the position. I can try something, but it's going to require covering fire and about 60 seconds to set up, Sarah replied. She loaded one of her blue-tipped bolts, the ones containing fast-acting sedative compound, and made careful adjustments to her crossbow's scope. The sedative bolts were designed to incapacitate rather than kill, making them perfect for situations where capture was preferable to elimination. Sarah's first shot struck the primary gunner's center mass. Within 30 seconds, he collapsed unconscious, leaving his partner confused and unable to operate the heavy machine gun effectively. Her second shot, fired while the team provided covering fire, struck the second enemy fighter with the same result. With the machine gun position neutralized non-lethally, Morrison was able to reposition the team to a more defensible location while maintaining the option to interrogate the unconscious enemy fighters later. "Outstanding work, Doc," Morrison said as they consolidated their new position. "That crossbow system of yours is proving more versatile than any of us imagined." But the ambush wasn't over. As the team prepared to continue their movement toward the extraction point, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through her night vision scope, she could see additional enemy fighters moving into positions that would surround their new defensive position. The enemy was attempting to encircle the SEAL team, using their superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain to prevent any escape. If successful, the ambush would become a siege that the team couldn't win through conventional tactics. Sarah made a decision that would demonstrate the full tactical potential of her medical crossbow system. Instead of waiting for the enemy to complete their encirclement, she would use her specialized bolts to create confusion and panic among the enemy forces. Loading one of her green-tipped bolts, the ones containing the compound that simulated death, Sarah targeted an enemy fighter who was moving into position on the northern ridge. The bolt struck home, and the fighter immediately collapsed in apparent death, causing his companions to believe they were under attack from an unseen sniper. Sarah repeated the process with 3 more enemy fighters, each one collapsing in simulated death after being struck by her specialized bolts. The psychological effect on the remaining enemy fighters was exactly what she had hoped for. They began retreating from positions they believed were being targeted by a highly skilled marksman. The enemy's retreat allowed Morrison to reposition the team for movement toward their extraction point, but they still faced the challenge of moving 3 wounded men across several kilometers of hostile territory. This was where Sarah's conventional medical training combined with her unconventional weapon system to provide solutions that no standard military doctrine could have anticipated. Using her anesthetic bolts, she was able to manage pain for all 3 wounded team members, allowing them to move under their own power while remaining alert and capable of fighting if necessary. Rodriguez had regained consciousness and was experiencing no pain from his head injury thanks to the localized anesthetic. Blake could use his wounded arm normally despite the gunshot wound to his shoulder. Davis was able to walk on his injured leg with minimal discomfort, though Sarah maintained close supervision to prevent further injury. As they began their movement toward landing zone Bravo, Morrison fell into step beside Sarah. "Doc, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I wasn't sure how a medic with unconventional equipment would fit into our team dynamics." Sarah continued scanning the surrounding terrain for threats while responding. "No apology necessary, sir. Skepticism is healthy in special operations. Results matter more than first impressions. Well, your results tonight have been exceptional. You've not only kept our wounded fighting effectively, but you've provided tactical advantages that I've never seen from a medical officer. That crossbow system of yours is going to revolutionize how we think about combat medicine." The extraction went smoothly, with the team reaching landing zone Bravo ahead of schedule despite their casualties. As they waited for the extraction helicopter, Sarah provided final medical care to her patients, ensuring they would remain stable during the flight back to base. Blake tested his shoulder range of motion with amazement. "Doc, how long does this anesthetic effect last?" "About 4 to 6 hours, Sarah replied. "Long enough to get you back to base for proper surgical treatment, but you'll start feeling some discomfort as it wears off." Davis nodded his agreement. "This is incredible. I can walk normally on a fractured leg with no pain at all. How is that possible?" Sarah smiled as she secured her crossbow system for transport. "Sometimes the best weapon is the one nobody expects you to have. Tonight we learned that effective combat medicine isn't just about treating wounds.
It's about preventing wounds, managing wounds, and sometimes using wounds tactically to achieve mission objectives. As the extraction helicopter appeared in the distance, Sarah Chen realized that her time with SEAL Team 7 had fundamentally changed from a trial period to a permanent assignment. Her unconventional approach to combat medicine had not only proven effective, but had opened new possibilities for special operations medicine that nobody had previously considered. The mockery she had faced upon arrival seemed like ancient history now. In its place was the hard-earned respect of elite warriors who had seen her perform under the most demanding conditions possible. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that innovation in battlefield medicine could save lives in ways that conventional training had never anticipated. Back at Forward Operating Base Viper, the debriefing session following Operation Serpent Strike had drawn attention from far beyond SEAL Team 7. Word of Sarah Chen's unconventional medical tactics and her specialized crossbow system had spread through the special operations community with the speed that only truly revolutionary developments achieved. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stood before a room filled not just with his own team members, but with senior officers from multiple special operations units, medical personnel from the Army's Special Operations Medical Training Center, and representatives from the Navy's Tactical Medicine Development Program. Colonel James Patterson, the base commander, had personally requested a detailed briefing on what he was calling the most significant advancement in special operations medicine since the introduction of combat antibiotics. Sitting beside him was Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a civilian contractor who specialized in battlefield medical innovation and had flown in specifically to evaluate Sarah's crossbow system. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Colonel Patterson began, studying the after-action report on his tablet. Hospital Corpsman Chen not only provided exceptional medical care under fire, but she used her medical equipment as tactical weapons to neutralize enemy threats and enhance team effectiveness? Morrison nodded. Sir, what we witnessed during Operation Serpent Strike represents a fundamental shift in how we should think about the role of medical personnel in special operations. Doc Chen didn't just treat our wounded. She prevented wounds, managed pain to keep wounded operators fighting effectively, and used non-lethal methods to neutralize enemy threats in ways that provided tactical advantages. Dr. Harper leaned forward with obvious professional interest. Can you describe the specific capabilities of these specialized crossbow bolts in more detail? Sarah, who had been sitting quietly while Morrison handled most of the briefing, cleared her throat. Ma'am, the crossbow system was designed around the principle that battlefield medicine should be proactive rather than purely reactive. Each bolt type serves a specific medical or tactical purpose. She opened her equipment case, displaying the various colored-coded bolts that had proven so effective during the mission. The yellow-tipped bolts contain a localized anesthetic compound that provides complete pain relief without affecting motor function or consciousness. This allows wounded personnel to continue operating effectively while preventing shock and trauma responses. Colonel Patterson examined one of the bolts with the careful attention of someone who understood that small innovations often had large tactical implications. How precise is the delivery system? At ranges up to 50 meters, I can place a bolt within a 2-inch circle consistently. The compound is absorbed through muscle tissue and provides effects within 30 to 60 seconds, lasting approximately 4 to 6 hours. Staff Sergeant Blake, whose shoulder had been treated with the anesthetic system during the mission, spoke up from his position in the back of the room. Sir, I was able to operate my weapon and perform all necessary tactical functions with zero pain from a gunshot wound. The difference in combat effectiveness was remarkable. Dr. Harper made extensive notes while asking her next question. What about the sedative compounds? How do they compare to traditional, less lethal options? Sarah selected one of the blue-tipped bolts from her collection. The sedative bolts provide rapid incapacitation without permanent injury. The compound is absorbed through muscle tissue and typically renders a target unconscious within 30 seconds, with effects lasting 2 to 4 hours depending on body weight and general health. Morrison added his own tactical perspective. The sedative bolts allowed us to neutralize enemy threats without killing them, which provided intelligence opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. We were able to capture 2 enemy fighters who provided valuable information about Taliban supply networks in the region. Colonel Patterson exchanged glances with Dr. Harper before asking the question that everyone in the room had been thinking. What kind of medical training and expertise was required to develop this system? Sarah had expected this question and had prepared her answer carefully. Sir, the crossbow system grew out of my experience working in my parents' clinic in Detroit, where we often treated patients who needed immediate pain management but couldn't risk the side effects of traditional pain medications. I combined that experience with advanced combat medicine training and specialized knowledge of pharmacology and toxicology. The key insight was recognizing that battlefield medicine doesn't have to be limited to treating wounds after they occur, Sarah continued. By thinking of medical intervention as a tactical capability, we can prevent wounds, manage wounds more effectively, and even use medical techniques to achieve mission objectives. Harper had been taking detailed notes throughout the briefing, and her questions became increasingly technical as she explored the implications of Sarah's innovations. Have you considered the potential applications of this technology beyond special operations? Harper asked. Emergency medical services, law enforcement, even civilian medical emergencies could benefit from rapid, precise drug delivery systems. Before Sarah could respond, Morrison interrupted with information that changed the entire tone of the discussion. There's something else you need to know about Doc Chen's performance during Operation Serpent Strike, Morrison said, his voice taking on the formal tone he used for official reports. Her crossbow system wasn't just tactically effective. It may have prevented a significant intelligence disaster. The room fell silent as Morrison opened a classified folder that had been delivered just before the briefing began. The Taliban weapons cache we destroyed contained more than just conventional munitions. Intelligence analysis of the materials we captured indicates that the facility was being used to coordinate attacks on coalition bases throughout the region. The intelligence materials Doc Chen's tactics allowed us to capture have already led to the disruption of 3 planned attacks. Colonel Patterson leaned back in his chair with an expression that suggested he was recalculating the significance of everything he had heard. Additionally, Morrison continued, the enemy fighters we captured using Doc Chen's sedative bolts have provided information that led to the identification of a senior Taliban commander who had been operating in the area for over 2 years without detection. Sarah felt a strange mixture of pride and surprise. She had focused so intently on the immediate tactical situation during the mission that she hadn't fully considered the broader intelligence implications of her actions. Dr. Harper closed her notebook and looked directly at Sarah. Hospital Corpsman Chen, what you've accomplished represents the kind of innovative thinking that the military medical community has been seeking for years. The question now is how quickly we can evaluate, refine, and potentially distribute this technology to other special operations units. Colonel Patterson nodded his agreement. I'm recommending that Doc Chen be temporarily assigned to the Special Operations Medical Development Program to work with Dr. Harper's team on formal evaluation and potential system improvements. Morrison looked genuinely surprised by this development. Sir, with respect, Doc Chen has become an integral part of my team's effectiveness. Reassigning her now would significantly impact our operational capabilities. I understand your concerns, Commander, Colonel Patterson replied. But we're potentially looking at technology that could save hundreds of lives and enhance mission effectiveness across the entire special operations community. The benefits of proper development and distribution far outweigh the temporary loss of one medic, even one as exceptional as Doc Chen. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being discussed as if she weren't present in the room. Finally, she cleared her throat to interject her own perspective. Sirs, if I may offer a suggestion, Sarah began. What if we approach this as a field testing opportunity? I could continue operating with SEAL Team 7 while working with Dr. Harper's development team to refine the system based on real-world operational experience. Harper's eyes lit up with professional enthusiasm. That's actually an excellent approach. Rather than taking you away from operational duties, we could embed researchers with your team to observe and document system performance under actual combat conditions. Morrison looked relieved at this compromise. That would allow us to maintain operational effectiveness while contributing to system development. My team would be willing to serve as test subjects for system improvements and modifications. Colonel Patterson considered the proposal for several moments before nodding his approval. Very well. Doc Chen will remain assigned to SEAL Team 7 while also working with the Medical Development Program. Harper, I want weekly progress reports on system development and field testing results. As the formal briefing concluded and the various officers and researchers began to leave, Morrison approached Sarah with an expression that mixed professional admiration with personal curiosity. "Doc, I have to ask, when you first arrived here with that crossbow system, did you anticipate that it would have this kind of impact?" Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. "Honestly, sir, I hoped it would prove useful, but I had no idea it would generate this level of interest. I developed the system because I believed there had to be better ways to practice battlefield medicine, but I never imagined it would be considered revolutionary." Blake, who had been waiting to speak with Sarah, joined their conversation. "Doc, speaking for the team, we want you to know that what happened during Operation Serpent Strike went way beyond just good medical care. You saved lives, enhanced our tactical capabilities, and proved that innovation in military medicine can come from unexpected places." Rodriguez, who had recovered completely from his concussion thanks to Sarah's treatment, nodded his agreement. "Doc, you've changed how we think about what's possible in combat medicine. That crossbow system of yours isn't just a medical tool, it's a force multiplier." As the team members dispersed to their various duties, Sarah found herself alone with her thoughts for the first time since returning from the mission. The transformation from just a medic to recognized innovator had happened so quickly that she was still processing the implications. Dr. Kamatot. Harper approached her as she was packing her crossbow system back into its carrying case. "Hospital Corpsman Chen, I want you to understand the significance of what you've accomplished. The spectator of some fertilities. Military medicine has traditionally been reactive. We treat wounds after they occur, manage pain after it develops, and evacuate casualties after they're injured." Sarah looked up from her equipment, listening intently. "What you've done is make military medicine proactive and tactical," Dr. Harper continued. "You've created a system that prevents wounds, manages pain proactively, and uses medical techniques to achieve mission objectives. This represents a fundamental shift in military medical thinking." Sarah nodded slowly, beginning to understand the broader implications of her innovations. "Ma'am, I just saw problems that needed solutions and developed tools to address those problems. I didn't set out to revolutionize military medicine." Dr. Harper smiled. "The best innovations often come from people who aren't trying to be revolutionary. They're just trying to solve immediate practical problems. Your crossbow system works because it addresses real tactical and medical needs that traditional approaches haven't adequately addressed." As Sarah walked back to her quarters that evening, she reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred since her arrival at Forward Operating Base Viper. The mockery and skepticism she had initially faced had been replaced not just by acceptance, but by recognition that her unconventional approach represented a new paradigm in special operations medicine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to refine and improve her crossbow system. But tonight, Sarah Chen could take pride in knowing that her innovative thinking had not only earned the respect of elite warriors, but had potentially opened new possibilities for saving lives and enhancing mission effectiveness throughout the special operations community. The journey from just a medic to recognized innovator had been completed, but Sarah understood that her real work was just beginning. 6 months after Operation Serpent Strike, Sarah Chen stood in the Advanced Medical Training Facility at the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters in Coronado, California, watching as the third class of Special Operations medics learned to use refined versions of her crossbow system. The facility buzzed with activity as medics from Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Marine Force Reconnaissance, and Air Force Pararescue units trained on equipment that had evolved far beyond her original prototype. Elizabeth Harper approached Sarah's observation position, carrying a thick folder filled with performance data and field reports from units that had adopted the new tactical medical systems. "The results continue to exceed our most optimistic projections, Dr. Duran," Harper said, opening the folder to reveal charts and graphs documenting mission success rates, casualty statistics, and operational effectiveness measures. "Units equipped with your system are reporting 30% fewer casualties requiring evacuation, 40% improvement in wounded personnel returning to duty, and significant increases in intelligence gathering from non-lethal enemy captures." Sarah studied the data with the analytical mind that had originally driven her to develop unconventional solutions to battlefield medical challenges.
The numbers were impressive, but she found herself more interested in the individual case studies that showed real people benefiting from innovations that had grown out of her original crossbow design. What's particularly noteworthy, Dr. Harper continued, is how different units have adapted and improved upon your basic concepts. The Army Special Forces medics have developed specialized bolts for treating chemical exposure. The Air Force pararescue teams have created high-altitude variants for mountain warfare. Even conventional medical units are requesting versions adapted for civilian emergency response. Through the training facility's large windows, Sarah could see SEAL Team 7 preparing for their latest mission. Lieutenant Commander Morrison was conducting a final equipment check while his team members tested the newest generation of tactical medical equipment that had evolved from Sarah's original innovations. The team had completed 12 successful missions since Operation Serpent Strike, and Sarah's role had evolved from experimental medic to integral team leader whose tactical medical capabilities were considered essential to mission planning. More importantly, her relationship with the team had transformed from cautious acceptance to complete trust and mutual respect. Staff Sergeant Blake approached their observation position, his left shoulder showing no residual effects from the gunshot wound he had sustained during the ambush 6 months earlier. "Doc, we're heading out in 30 minutes for Operation Desert Falcon," Blake said. "Morrison wants to know if you've finished testing the new rapid deployment anesthetic system." Sarah nodded, indicating a modified crossbow that looked significantly different from her original prototype. The new version was more compact, featured improved accuracy at extended range, and incorporated feedback from dozens of combat medics who had used similar systems in various operational environments. "The new system is ready for field testing," Sarah replied. "The delivery mechanism is more precise. The compounds have been refined based on operational experience, and we've added 2 new bolt types that should provide additional tactical options." Blake examined the new equipment with the professional interest of someone whose life had been directly impacted by Sarah's innovations. "What are the new bolt types designed to do?" Sarah opened a specialized case containing the latest generation of tactical medical bolts, each one representing months of development work based on lessons learned from actual combat operations. "The orange-tipped bolts contain a stimulant compound that can counteract shock or unconsciousness in friendly personnel," Sarah explained. "If someone is knocked unconscious but doesn't have serious injuries, an orange bolt can restore consciousness and combat effectiveness within minutes." She selected a second bolt with purple marking tape. "The purple bolts are designed for what we're calling tactical revival. If someone has to simulate serious injury or death for operational security reasons, the purple bolt can provide the physiological effects needed to fool enemy observation while maintaining the person's ability to respond to tactical situations." Blake whistled softly in appreciation. "Doc, you've essentially created a complete tactical medical arsenal that gives medics capabilities nobody ever imagined possible." Dr. Harper nodded her agreement. "What's remarkable is how these innovations have influenced military medical thinking beyond just special operations. Conventional military medical training now includes courses on proactive battlefield medicine, tactical pharmacology, and non-lethal tactical applications of medical technology." As they watched the training session below, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from a skeptical reception at Forward Operating Base Viper to recognition as one of the most innovative military medical practitioners of her generation. The transformation had not been without challenges. Developing new medical compounds required extensive testing and regulatory approval. Training medics to use the crossbow system effectively required months of specialized instruction. Most importantly, changing institutional thinking about the role of medical personnel in combat operations required overcoming decades of traditional doctrine and training. Lieutenant Commander Morrison joined their group, carrying mission briefing materials and wearing the expression of focused intensity that preceded every operation. "Doc, I wanted to personally thank you for what you've accomplished, not just for my team, but for the entire Special Operations community," Morrison began. "When you first arrived with that unconventional crossbow system, I'll admit I was skeptical. Now I can't imagine conducting operations without the tactical medical capabilities you've developed." Sarah appreciated Morrison's acknowledgement, but she was more interested in the broader implications of how military medicine had evolved. "Sir, what's been most rewarding is seeing how other medics have taken the basic concepts and developed them further," Sarah replied. The innovations we're seeing now go far beyond what I originally envisioned. Morrison nodded toward the training facility, where medics were practicing with equipment that represented the collective innovations of dozens of medical professionals who had built upon Sarah's original concepts. That's exactly what good military innovation should do, Morrison said. One person develops a breakthrough concept, and then the entire community works together to refine and improve it until it becomes standard operating procedure. Dr. Harper closed her folder and looked directly at Sarah. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The Pentagon has approved funding for a new advanced tactical medicine research center, and they've requested that you serve as the founding director. Sarah felt a moment of surprise at this unexpected development. Ma'am, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not sure I'm ready to leave operational medicine for a research position. Actually, Dr. Harper continued, the position would allow you to continue operational deployments while directing research and development of next-generation tactical medical systems. You'd be able to test new innovations in actual combat situations while leading a team of researchers and developers. Morrison's expression suggested that he had been aware of this possibility and approved of the arrangement. Doc, this would allow you to continue working with operational units while ensuring that your innovations benefit the entire military medical community. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility, indicating that SEAL Team 7 was being called to immediate deployment status. Morrison immediately shifted into operational mode, signaling his team to prepare for emergency departure. Doc, we need to move now, Morrison said. There's been a situation at a coalition base near the Pakistani border. Multiple casualties reported, and conventional medical evacuation isn't possible due to enemy activity in the area. Sarah grabbed her equipment case, automatically running through her mental checklist of tactical medical supplies and specialized crossbow bolts. The emergency deployment would provide another opportunity to test her latest innovations under actual combat conditions. As SEAL Team 7 boarded their transport helicopter, Sarah realized that the journey from mockery to respect that had begun 6 months earlier was continuing to evolve. Her role had expanded from individual innovator to leader of a community of medical professionals who were revolutionizing battlefield medicine. During the flight to their objective area, Blake leaned over to speak directly into her ear over the helicopter's noise. Doc, regardless of what happens with the research center, I want you to know that what you've accomplished has changed how we think about what's possible in military medicine. Rodriguez, fully recovered from his concussion and back to his position as team point man, nodded his agreement. Doc, you've proven that innovation can come from anywhere, and that the best solutions often come from people who aren't afraid to challenge conventional thinking. As the helicopter flew through the Afghan mountains toward another crisis that would test Sarah's tactical medical innovations, she reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred since her arrival at Forward Operating Base Viper. The mockery she had initially faced, only a medic, had been replaced by recognition that medical personnel could be force multipliers whose innovations enhanced mission effectiveness and saved lives in ways that traditional combat training couldn't achieve. Her crossbow system had evolved from a personal experiment to standard equipment used by special operations medics throughout the military. More importantly, her approach to proactive tactical medicine had influenced training programs, operational procedures, and strategic thinking about the role of medical personnel in combat operations. As the helicopter began its descent toward the crisis area, Sarah Chen prepared to once again demonstrate that the most powerful weapons on any battlefield aren't always the ones that destroy. Sometimes they're the ones that heal, protect, and preserve the fighting capability of the warriors who depend on them. The journey from just a medic to recognized innovator and leader had been completed, but Sarah understood that her real legacy would be measured by the lives saved and missions accomplished by the thousands of medical professionals who would carry her innovations forward into future conflicts. In the end, the weapon choice that had silenced her critics wasn't about the crossbow system itself. It was about the innovative thinking, practical problem-solving, and unwavering commitment to excellence that the crossbow represented. These qualities, more than any specific piece of equipment, would define the future of military medicine and ensure that Sarah Chen's influence would continue long after her own operational career had ended. The helicopter touched down in another hostile area, and Sarah Chen prepared to once again prove that sometimes the most devastating weapon on any battlefield is the person carrying it.